Thank you so much for joining us today, and Happy New Year. As Brad introduced, my name is Tiffany Tovey, and I'm the Director of the Office of Assessment, Evaluation, and Research Services at UNC Greensboro. I actually was in a 3-hour advisory board meeting for a project that I do internal evaluation work for this morning. It's a principal preparation program, and 30 minutes of that 3-hour meeting was dedicated to somebody from the Department of Public Instruction coming in and talking about all of the implications of generative AI for K-12 education. And I got to learn more than I knew already, which is not a lot, let's just say, about what's about to happen to us around artificial intelligence. And apparently robots are already about to be walking amongst us. Tesla's got a robot coming out this year, and there's another one coming out this year. And it's just like the growth of what large language models and artificial intelligence is going to touch is just going to be exponential in ways that I don't think we can imagine right now. So I look at this experience that I'm going to tell you about today as kind of my first foray into thinking about trying to be proactive in the space of artificial intelligence or large language models. And so let me tell you a little bit about kind of the overview of what I want to talk about today. So first, I'm going to share a bit about the course that is the particular topic of focus for this talk today, the context of that course, and my thinking in preparation for a year ago, spring 2024, when I taught this course and implemented this series of activities. Then we're going to move into, I'll just show you a little bit of a snippet of what the students got to see in terms of starting to get into program evaluation of the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They actually, quote unquote, received a letter from Dumbledore and a charge from the Magical Education Foundation. And we'll get to look at that here in just a minute to kind of give you a sense of how they started this project. And then I want to just briefly introduce kind of the reason why we brought this kind of case simulation project into this class. So we wanted to develop a model evaluation plan through this case simulation with the students that are in the class. I'll then move into kind of challenges and implications for teaching and learning, just some things that myself and my two TAs kind of brought up as things that we might do differently or things that we've underscored as a function of this experience. And then, as Brad said already, I kind of have a challenge. We can call it a challenge. I've got a lot of reflection questions. Those of you who know me know that I can come up with reflection questions forever, so I'm sure we won't get to all the questions that I have for the audience. And what I also know about, these conversations is that they're rich. And so the more you can kind of ask questions and the more you can share in this space, I think the more we're all learning. So I look forward to that space where we get to all talk together. But I want to start, like I was saying, with a bit about the course, the context, and my thinking, right? So what you see on this screen right now is actually directly from, most of the language here is directly from the syllabus for this class. So this course is an undergraduate course that is being offered to information science majors that are getting a concentration in information analytics. So this is one of, I think, 4 or 5 courses that they have to take in order to get that concentration. So they have to take like a data visualization class, a statistics class. I don't think they have to take a research methods class, and that's got its own series of problems, but they also can choose to take the evaluation class as a function of that concentration. And so the course itself, as described in the syllabus, provides an overview of the basic concepts in program evaluation, and they will also be introduced to the practice of program evaluation. And for me, when I think about an undergraduate class in program evaluation, the first and foremost thing that I want my students to understand is the evaluative thinking component of this work. Most of these students, although we have one student who applied to our grad program from this class last year, might be 2 by the end of it. We do not expect these folks to come out and be program evaluators. We expect these folks to come out and probably go do a data analytics job, do some data management sort of work and that sort of thing. And so what are the components of this class that I want to highlight so that we have a better group of folks that can do data related work in a more evaluative thinking sort of fashion? So the course will help you to engage more purposefully in the evaluative thinking process and understand the role of credible evidence, as well as critical deliberation with others in making sound evaluative judgments. Hopefully they leave the class with new insights and ways to look at and engage the world around them. I do not expect them to all do grant proposals. I do not expect them to create evaluation plans. I don't know that I expect them to collect data in the way that most program evaluators do, but understanding that process, I think, is crucial to a lot of professions that our undergraduates will be exposed to in the future. On the right-hand side, you see the kind of student learning outcomes associated with the class. And those of you who have taught before know that these are like the official language that goes up to the powers that be that makes it so that a course can run. So we know that the students have to develop an evaluation plan. They have to discuss how the context of a program influences the evaluation process. They have to understand and explain the roles of stakeholder groups in the evaluation process, formulate evaluation questions, design evaluation plans tailored to specific contexts, construct a program logic model, and also critique and provide constructive feedback on evaluation plans. If I were to revise this course, it may not have those objectives, but this is what was handed to me to do. So as a function of those learning objectives, I sat down. I had taught this class once before. Undergrads program evaluation isn't necessarily the most common course out there. So I started from scratch. These students don't know anything about program evaluation, and I had taught it once to 2 students before this class. The course is low enrolled because the concentration is very small right now, but we expect it to increase exponentially in the next couple of years. So this course, as I was preparing for it, I was really thinking again about the need for evaluative thinking. These students need to have the skills to meet the day and age that we're all talking about right now when we think about robots roaming on our planet. Evaluative thinking, I think, is probably the foundational skill set that professionals in our world need right now. And so I have a lot of passion, and I want to make sure that that is what the take-home message is for these undergrads as they leave the class. So in December of 2024, y'all, when I finally had the chance to sit down and think about what I wanted to do for my undergraduate program evaluation class, ChatGPT had it was fresh, right? Like, we didn't know much about ChatGPT at the time. I had used it for some small things and maybe had it help me with writing. I'd explored a little bit. And so I was like, how do I want my undergraduates to meet the challenge of ChatGPT in my class? And for me, I mean, this technology is not going anywhere. It's just not. And so I want to front load evaluative thinking, not just checking the boxes of the learning objectives of the class. So let's just bring this in intentionally. Let's embrace it completely was what I was thinking, and see how it goes in terms of using it for learning. And so, just like I said before, we started probably about week 6, week 5, something like that, in this class after a little bit of an introduction to program evaluation. The textbook we had for this class was the Being an Evaluator text by Donna Podums. And it's a wonderful text that really gets folks into the mind frame of what it looks like to be an evaluator and to not be so scared and mystified by the technical jargon of program evaluation, which is why I really appreciate the book. I have plenty of reflections on whether I would use it for undergraduates again, but Donna's book is really amazing. And if you haven't read it, you totally should. So week 5 or so in the class, we brought some actual printed papers to the students. The students in the class read a letter from Albus Dumbledore requesting help from the Professor Tovey and the ERM 414 team. He said, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing to you in a time of need for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. We've recently received a request from our esteemed funder, the Magical Education Foundation, to conduct a pilot program evaluation in the coming year. The evaluation aims to assess our school's performance based on the specific goals and indicators as outlined in the attached document from the foundation. While we're committed to fulfilling the funder's requirements, I'm particularly interested in engaging an evaluator who can delve deeper into the nuances of our educational environment. Hogwarts is a diverse institution, and we pride ourselves on our commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and social justice. These are our areas that we believe are crucial to our success, but may not be fully captured by the traditional indicators proposed by our funder." We are seeking a collaborative, learning-oriented approach that not only satisfies the funders' needs, but also allows us to explore and enhance our practices in fostering an inclusive and equitable learning community. I understand that this is a significant undertaking, and I assure you that Hogwarts is prepared to provide the necessary support and resources for this evaluation. We're eager to work with a team that can help us navigate these complexities and contribute to our ongoing efforts to create a magical educational experience. And it goes on a little bit. They got a little bit more in terms of attachments from the funder. And in those attachments, they got to see the three major goals that were outlined by the funder of what should be achieved by Hogwarts. Now, let me pause and say that I had a conversation with ChatGPT and I said, pretend you're Dumbledore and you're requesting a program evaluation, right? And it popped this output out, and then I modified it, right, and then used it for my class. So that's the first use of ChatGPT you're seeing. I'm helping it to create, or I'm using it to help create instructional resources. It created these goals too. I did not have terribly much to do with it. And I thought it was really cool to see specific indicators that are really based in the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, like actual books, like these standardized magical exams, I think are from the real books, like that sort of thing. And so it's clear that ChatGPT can really pull on the wealth of resources around Harry Potter to create this content. And so what did we do? Well, what we did is we walked through the evaluation planning process for what I would consider an intervention for the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This helped us to engage with the topics in the class and develop the key components, like I said, of an evaluation plan via PowerPoint. So it served as this in-class model so that they could use that model for their final capstone project in the class. And that capstone project, they actually had to choose from a list of interventions that were put on by our university. So these are real interventions that they're using for their capstone project, but for the in-class project, we were focusing on Hogwarts. And so what did they have to develop in terms of their evaluation plan? Well, they had to develop a background and context for the intervention. They also had to talk about who matters in the evaluation process. So who are the primary and secondary interest holders for the program? Who are the program participants? That sort of thing. What's the intervention logic? So what is the logic model that includes inputs, resources, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts that is associated with Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry? They had to talk about the purpose of the evaluation, what their approach would be to the evaluation, and what values were to inform that evaluation plan. Develop a series of evaluation questions and a matrix, a data collection matrix that's associated with those evaluation questions. Also talk about what they're considering in terms of strategies for communicating findings. What happens if they get bad data? What happens if they get, negative data? And what happens if they get positive data? And then finally, how would they handle the success or failure of the intervention as an evaluator? So if they get negative findings, how might they handle that? How might they field those problems accordingly? What might you consider in reporting the findings and what might happen to the program itself? So some reflective practice in that space. All right, and so here is briefly just wanted to share a bit of kind of the sorts of things that we were hoping for the students to develop. The first time I taught the undergraduate program evaluation class, I taught it using Gail Barrington's Evaluation Time book, which is also a really fabulous book. If you haven't read it, it includes a lot of information. It was a little too technical focus for my undergrads, which is why I switched to Donna Podum's book. But one of the things that Gail talks about in her text is what to boil down a program theory into an if-then statement. And I've really enjoyed that for teaching undergraduates. And so the if-then statement for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is, if Hogwarts appropriately utilizes its expert faculty, diverse magical resources, and community-focused activities, then students will achieve high academic and practical magical skills, demonstrate ethical behavior, and foster a supportive community, which will ultimately lead to graduates who contribute positively to the wizarding world. And of course, this was very much guided by us as facilitators in the class, but this was part of the product of their evaluation plan to be able to say so concisely what we think the theory of change for the program is. Another example to kind of give you a sense of the sorts of activities that I gave the students when we went into the room is we actually created ChatGPT generated content that emulated focus groups with key leadership in the program, right? So this is just an example. We might have asked ChatGPT to pretend to be Dumbledore or Hermione Granger and asked ChatGPT to answer the question, why does evaluation of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry matter? And these two quotes are generated from ChatGPT directly, but they're in the kind of language and in the culture of the two characters to kind of give a sense of what the values are that are guiding their desire for this evaluation. And so what we did is we gave them these kinds of narratives, these kinds of like practically transcripts from the leadership, and had them really come up with what is the logic and theory behind the program? What are the activities that help? What are the values that these folks are centering? And how is that going to inform how we might go about the evaluation process? It sounds like we did really fabulous work, but there were a lot of challenges in this process. One of the challenges is buy-in and whether the content felt relevant. So Harry Potter is apparently a very millennial reference, according to one of my undergraduate students. Harry Potter's not as relevant as it used to be anymore. It also carries contention, a lot of political contention around the sorts of things that the author of the Harry Potter text has been saying around transgender and that sort of thing. And that actually did come up in my course. I can get into that a little bit more if you want, but the challenge for me was that I came into the course already ready to use ChatGPT for something very specific. I thought about telling the students they could pick their intervention and we could just try to figure it out on the fly, but I wanted more control. And so I just said, we're using Hogwarts. It wasn't a conversation between me and the students, right? I just didn't feel like I wanted to lose that much control. And I think the lack of buy-in about Harry Potter specifically had some issues. I don't think students were able to grasp onto it as well as they could have if I'd received more buy-in, right? And then also, there were only 4 students in this class. So the first time I taught the class, there were 2. And the second time I taught the class, there were 4. And the challenge of having only 4 students is if you have not a lot of buy-in and not a lot of students, there's less traction in how the activities will go. I had 1 super stellar honors student and 3 students that really seemed like they could care less about how the class was going, frankly. And so that buildup from not even knowing what program evaluation is, all the way to understanding the value of evaluative thinking in their professional careers was a tough climb for us. It's also difficult to convey the complexity of evaluation within a single experience. It was really hard to get the students to understand that even though it's actually a benefit to be using Harry Potter as an intervention, because it is often the case that program evaluators come into interventions and have no idea what they are, and then they have to learn and understand the context of a program in order to truly do a good evaluation job in the first place. That said, it's difficult to convey that complexity in that single activity. And then finally, I think fictional scenarios can run the risk of oversimplification or trivialization of really important program evaluation and evaluative thinking pieces. So if I don't feel that real connection to experiences of marginalization, if I don't feel that real connection to whatever the intervention is or whatever it is, right, it could trivialize the process and not show that value. And that's something that I've been reflecting on as a function of being the teacher of this course. I am not teaching this course this year. I get a break. So maybe we'll bring a robot in the flesh when we do ERM 414 again next year. I don't know. All right, so some implications for teaching evaluation. The first one for me, and I knew this before this course experience wholeheartedly, but it's just another underscoring. In order for people to really understand program evaluation as a practice, you have to provide context. It's essential for understanding the nuances of program evaluation and the types of practical decisions that evaluators make based on the circumstances that they happen to find themselves in. It's also the case that ChatGPT provides a wide open playing ground of possibility for shaping pedagogical activities. It is ridiculous. I think I did too much, if you had to ask. I think I probably overdid it on the ChatGPT and or could have thought through some of these activities a little bit more ahead of time. But that said, I was just reflecting with my TA earlier today for this class, and I said, I don't know that I would do this way at all anymore, just given the advances in technology. So that's some fodder to think about. Integration of AI through ChatGPT in teaching also requires careful consideration to ensure that it enhances rather than complicates learning. I think the activities that I gave were really high bar in terms of you have to be bought in, reflective, thoughtful, work with your peers. And sometimes I was a little bit disappointed in the lack of excitedness about some of these activities. And then finally, using ChatGPT to stimulate evaluation activities is useful, and I definitely have ideas about what to do next. I'm not sure it's Harry Potter, y'all. I could do it again, but I would want to increase the buy-in. I think the reason why Harry Potter is a good choice is because large language models work off of data. And if they have a bunch of data to work off of, they will give you good information for the most part. But if you choose something a little bit more obscure, then it might be harder to simulate the sorts of activities with a more realistic vibe than if you choose something that's a little bit more popular. I thought about using like the drug abuse resistance education program, the DARE program, as a simulation. And I think that that hits closer to home, but it also might feel a little bit millennial too. And I'll leave that right there. So I have a couple of slides, but I want to start with just a little bit around reflections from you all. And if there's some time, I have some general points of reflection on using ChatGPT for evaluation practice here after a bit. But instead of me talking at you any further, I want us to kind of open up the floor. What are you thinking about now that you've heard me share for the past 30 minutes or so? If you've got any questions, and then there's some more specific reflection questions that are kind of listed below that.